There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and to another Friday Reads, and oh boy am I in a good mood today. I'm feeling good, I'm feeling better even than last week. That's all I'm going to say about my health, because that's all you need to know. I'm feeling better, and I've had a glorious week. Reading-wise, to a certain... Yes, reading-wise, and a little bit mixed in the reading department, but not in the book department. Oh my god! So... the big news is that the online book launch for James Morrison's debut novel, Gibbons, or One Bloody Thing After Another, went off without, not quite without a hitch, but close to being without a hitch, on Saturday night. And the video, I just posted the video last night, so you can check that out. And the novel sounds just fabulous. Dorian Stuber really did the bulk of the work involved, in that he did an online interview with James, and that was fabulous. And by the time I heard all that, I was very curious to read it for myself. Do check out the video. And one little glitch was that for some reason there was something that didn't quite work with James's audio that was most noticeable when he read a chapter from the novel, and it was almost impossible to hear. So he re-recorded that and sent it to me. So the crisp, crystal clear version of his reading of I think it's chapter 3, is in the video. So check that out, especially if you attended and had trouble. When he was just talking off the cuff and answering questions, you could hear him much better. But and I got confused about Zoom links. So there was a little bit of a snafu at the very beginning, but I don't think too many people knew about that, so I shouldn't have even mentioned it. I'll probably edit that out. I won't even own up to it, but it was my first one, and hopefully not my last. If you want me to organize your book launch, get a hold of me. I don't think I have any other news, but life really is beautiful this week, so may it continue. Oh, there's my Amazon delivery. And again, I don't have I'm still ramping up my reading, and maybe I'll never get back to reading 8 hours a day. Maybe that's in the past, but I'm reading more with each passing week in this recovery phase, but don't have a whole lot to tell you. But so I have 2 special guests on my Friday Reads this week. Soon I won't even be appearing myself in my Friday Reads, and maybe I'll finally get my numbers up. Here is the first mystery guest. Hello, Heather. How lovely to have you on my channel and embedded within my Friday Reads this week. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very delighted to be here. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm doing great. And Heather's channel is Heather Gregg, and she does all kinds of fabulous stuff with creativity and cooking and art, and oh my goodness. We just finished taping in a forthcoming episode of Zooming In that you'll get to see later, and she has a show and tell thing for us. What's your show and tell topic, Heather?
Okay. Well, I'm delighted to share about going to a literary festival at one of the centres for Bloomsbury Circle, Charleston House. This was a house where people lived together in the Bloomsbury Circle, and there was a lot of to and throwing together. It was a delight to be there, to be very conscious of Virginia Woolf herself. There's a lovely sculpture of her, which is in the studio, which is where that Duncan Grant would paint a lot, and so would Vanessa. You see, Virginia and Vanessa, it becomes difficult to remember which was which, but they worked together in that studio, and other people that were in the group would stay in other parts of the house, like Maynard Keynes, economist. And it was such a lovely space to be working together, creating. And while one sister would be painting, her sister was down the road writing amazing novels, and the whole thing they were working towards was the modernist culture that was coming through, the 20th century freshness coming through the different arts in England. So the festival I was at was called Small Wonder 2023, runs every year in October, and it celebrates short form. And this made me think of you, because you have so many parts in your channel where you're showing short stories, and then you also have doing the camera flip, you've other people talking about short stories from across the world, and even your
Yeah,
Sunday sentences.
novellas,
I came across and thought, I wonder could
Sunday
that come back?
sentences.
Yeah, what a wonderful idea, just a single sentence. So the whole festival was towards that. We had William Seagart talking about the writer of the Poetry Pharmacy series and Letters in the Attic. I took part in where we were talking about letters we discovered and
Oh,
reading them out. And I got to read a letter which I had written as a variation on the Christmas round robin letter you tend to get at Christmas, saying all the things your family has done. So I did a humorous version and I got to read it out. So I think it would be a
like,
fantastic experience for someone who likes short form like yourself to go along to, and also to see the house. So you've been following the Bloomsbury group in your readings, yes?
oh, definitely. Yes, a big fan of Virginia Woolf and very interested in all of them, and especially since so many of them were not straight.
Yes, that's
And I'm
right. That
very
was very
interested in
clear.
queer history. Recently, like a couple years ago, maybe there was a book about it was kind of a history of all the queer goings on in the Bloomsbury
Yeah.
circle, and I think some of it might have been in the Next Generation. That
Mhm.
sounded just fabulous. I heard an interview with that author, who herself is a Strachey. She's I
Mhm.
think, great niece of Lytton Strachey, who wrote the book.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called Young Bloomsbury: The Generation That Reimagined Love, Freedom, and Self-Expression by Nino Strachey. And I have a copy on my shelf. I can't find it. Haven't read it yet. Very much want to.
That's
When
fine.
I go to the website for Charleston House, I see that there's
Uh-huh.
two venues, both in
That's right.
Sussex. So which
That's
one
right.
were you at? There's one in Firle and one in Lewis.
Yes. Lewis is the town, and Firle is where the address that would be where the festival is, where the house is. And the
Okay.
festival was in the hay barn. And Lewis is very exciting. That's the nearest town for where you would go by train, for example. And it was is a project done with the local community where they had, like many towns do now, some shops that were no longer being used. The shops were just sitting unused, and they have made it into an exhibition space so they can have exhibitions that are to do with the what will be shown at Charleston, and just for the general public to have something on their high street that is using up those empty shops and full of art and a place to visit.
This
Excellent.
festival was designed for creatives, artists, writers, or was it more for readers,
Yes, I
or
think
both?
probably. I think it's just for anybody who's interested. I think it would cater a lot for readers, and short form would cover then obviously there would be poetry and letters, obviously, that I was involved with, but also articles and recipes as well. They were featuring a new cookbook coming out. So all sorts of things that are short, small, and but a sense of small wonder as the festival's called, and it's held annually. So I think it's something rather wonderful to go along to. And it was like a long weekend for short form writing, is how they described it. And it runs for about 3 or 4 days.
Heather, you yourself have all kinds of interesting things going on. Tell us about what's coming up, I believe, in November.
Okay, well, in November, I will be teaching a couple of courses online that I developed, which is to encourage folks in their creative writing. One is called Turning the Page, which is starting to come back after not writing for a while or for the very first time. And then there is another one called Words and Photos, where we look at using photographs as ways to start us writing quite easily, because these days we're surrounded by images, and they both run online, are bookable via Eventbrite, and the single one is 2 hours, and then the other one is a double, 2 hours and 2 days, a week apart, Wednesday evenings.
How interesting. So those Eventbrite links will be in the show notes for people
Yes.
to check out. That sounds incredible. I want to tell you about, just before we close. The author is a Canadian author from Toronto, Cary Fagan. And
Mhm.
he, in the sometime in the last 10 years, wrote a short story collection that was based exactly on that premise. He bought a collection of photos at a garage sale,
Mhm.
and they were
Ah,
all from the 60s or 70s or something, black and white things. And then he
uh-huh.
used them as inspiration for the short stories and
Fabulous. I love it.
put the photograph in the collection. So I've read a couple stories
Oh,
from it, which I loved. I want to read the whole book. The
okay.
short story collection is called The Old World. It's
Super.
wonderful. So
That just sounds amazing. I think my Christmas list is getting longer by the second. With that, I love the sound of that book. Really love it.
yours
I,
and mine both.
mm,
Heather, what a delight to have you on my
thank
Friday
you.
reads. And people
It's
stay
been
tuned
fun.
for Heather's appearance coming up on Zooming In, probably in about a few weeks from now. Happy reading and creating,
Thank you.
Heather.
Yes, and yourself as well, Sean.
Oh, don't you just love her? And here, somebody else to love is the second mystery guest, Trevor from the Mooks and the Gripes website and podcast. Welcome to my Friday Reads.
Thank you. I love this time of the week.
And your last episode was about what you had the translator for the On Fossa novels, Damien
Yes.
Searles, on, which I haven't had a chance to listen to yet. What's coming up in the near future on the Mooks and the Gripes podcast with you and Paul?
Yeah. So tomorrow morning we are meeting with another Damien, Damien Kelleher, who's from Australia,
Oh, yes,
to
yes.
talk about one of our favorite publishers, Dalkey Archive. And we'll talk about the Dalkey Archive in general, but then we each pick three books that we think just really stood out to us as what the Dalkey Archive maybe represents and how some of our favorite books that have spoken to us, why we love them so much. So I love these publisher episodes that we do every once in a while.
Yes, and Damien Kelleher is famous on Twitter for the pictures of his beautiful children in almost every
Yep.
tweet. So I hope he'll show some of those. That's
Unfortunately, he
wonderful.
says it's going to be after the girl's bedtime. We may have to rearrange things. I don't know because I think people won't recognize him.
Well, people certainly should go to check him out on Twitter or whatever we're calling it now. I'm still calling it Twitter. And I'm assuming you're going to start reading a new book today, or will be tomorrow, or what or books would you like to tell us
Oh,
about?
so I'm actually in the middle of one that I should finish this weekend. It's James McBride's The Heaven and Earth Grocery
Oh,
Store.
yes, yes,
He
yes.
he was he's like the Deacon King Kong. The
Yeah.
what was the other one? The Good Lord Bird. Am I
And then he
remembering that right?
wrote a memoir about his mother,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think.
I've this is actually the first thing I've read by him. It was picked by some of my friends to read, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm about 200 pages of its 360 page length. I'm a little bit over that, so I'm past the halfway point, and it's this really rich community story of a place called Chicken Hill, where there are. It used to be kind of a Jewish neighborhood, but now it's more of a black neighborhood,
Hmm.
and there are some Jewish folk who still live there. But of course, it's not in the larger community. It's not Jewish nor is it black. It's they're part of they're definitely marginalized, and he goes into such warm stories. I mean, every chapter begins with it feels like new characters and how they interact with each other in this community. And there's just an old storyteller's way of him putting it. I'm really, and it's propulsive. It's easy to sit down and just get, wash down 30, 40 pages and feel like you only read for a few minutes. But that's what I've got going and what I'm working on right now, other than I've talked to you about this before. I haven't finished it yet, but Sylvia Plath's biography. I'm well past the halfway point in that one. That is the Red Comet, her
Yes,
biography by Heather Clark,
yes.
and oh, I'm really enjoying that book entirely. So those
I've
are the
heard
two
very
big ones I'm
good
working on.
things about it. And for Sylvia Plath, there was something about her on Twitter today. Her birthday
Mm-hmm.
maybe is today or something, and it said she was born in 1932.
Oh,
She seems like so eternally young that I
yeah.
can't believe she was born older than my father if she were still alive. So there you go. This is great, Trevor. Standing invitation to drop in any old time on any Friday reads or anything else.
I appreciate it. I will take you up on it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Oh my God. It's a banner day on Sean the Book Maniac's channel. So now you're just stuck with me for the rest of the video. So goodbye. I know you're going to go away now. What have I done? I have one bale to tell you about. I have finished two, but can't talk about them very much. Oh, and I have two that I've started that I'm ready to tell you quite a bit about, and I'm probably going to start one. So that's going to be my book report for the week. My bail was this queer novel from the UK, Timothy Ireland's Who Lies Inside. It quickly became too YA for my taste. I mean, it was about a high school student or just graduating high school, but it just stopped holding my interest. And I found the writing didn't grab me enough, and the characterization of his parents, I thought, was just not nuanced enough or interesting enough to hold my interest. And I was reading a couple chapters that were all about his dysfunctional family, and the characters weren't well drawn enough. So I kept not wanting to pick it up, so finally I just listened to myself and didn't pick it up anymore. I finished the Korean-American novel YN by Esther Yi that I read as part of the Anna and Sean book club. I'll say a little bit about it, but it was for Anna Bailey Karras' podcast, Books on the Go. And so we taped that episode a couple nights ago. I finished the book 10 minutes before, a little bit earlier than 10 minutes before. And I quite enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It's not a Sean book, but it held my interest to the very end. And we had a very thought-provoking conversation about it. So you can wait. I'll probably post that on my channel, just like I did the first episode where we presented 3 books each and then chose one. But the one that I chose out of Anna's 3 was this novel, YN. It's all about K-pop and fandom, fangirling, and it gets very surreal. The surreal part, I mean, it held my interest. At no point did I ever think of bailing. Oh, that's not true. I did think of bailing in the first couple pages because her writing is a bit weird, but I got used to it pretty quick. But what I want to tell you about, for sure, is that, and you probably all are way ahead of me on this, I had not noticed because I'd never heard of this author or this book until Anna put it on my radar. But some months ago, 6 months ago, Jalen of The Bar and the Bookcase, on his fabulous podcast, Reading the Room, interviewed Esther Yi about it. And so I listened to that, and it was just a glorious conversation. So do check that out as well. And you may be interested in hearing Anna and I talk about the novel when that episode goes live sometime in the next week or 2, I think. So I read that. Last night I also finished this novella, Tim Krabbé's The Rider, translated from the Dutch by Sam Garrett, and I really enjoyed this. This was for the novella series with Barb Howard, the Calgary novelist. I'm not going to hold back on what I say here because I hadn't actually finished it when Barb and I taped that episode. So I have now finished it. It was originally published in Dutch in 1978. The English translation is 2002. I think it's autofiction because the character is also named Tim Krabbé, and he is a semi-professional or maybe even professional. I don't know what qualifies you as a professional bicycle racer, and I don't even know if that's the right term. Bicycle road racer. And it is one 150-kilometer ride, and it's a blow-by-blow of his stream of consciousness for every kilometer of the half-day race, interspersed with lots of reflections reminiscing going back to when he first got interested in bicycling and bicycling history. And it sounds the furthest from a Sean book that I could ever imagine, and I found it actually gripping. I mean, I didn't love it because I'm just not that interested, but I was shocked at how interested I was, and the writing is really, really great. So it's another 4-star read. So much terminology that I didn't know, and I haven't retained it. But there was the idea of what it means in a bicycle road race when one bicyclist attacks another. But I think it means tries to pull ahead, and the group of bicyclists is called is it a peloton or something? It was really interesting. So it was interesting enough that I actually think I want to watch a video of a bike race now that I kind of understand a lot of the psychological stuff and like what various things mean, and even what the object of it is. Like, I just have never really, the Tour de France, I knew vaguely what it was, but I never really cared, and now I kind of care a little bit because of this book. Tim Krabbé is also a professional chess player and has written novels about that. He's one novel, I don't know what it's about. It's called The Vanishing, that was made into a movie in Holland and then later made into another movie in the US. So he's fairly well known. especially if you're interested in cycle racing, bicycle road racing. This was really quite enjoyable. And I have started 2 books in the last week that I've read far enough into that I'm delighted to tell you about them. This is the new buddy read that Heidi of My Reading Life and I are doing, The Perfection of the Morning by Sharon Butala. This is her nature memoir and her memoir of after living 40-some years of her life as an urban person in Saskatchewan, she marries a rancher down in southern Saskatchewan and moves onto the ranch. And it's her memoir of that experience. It's her most well-known and I would say maybe beloved, most certainly most popular in terms of sales book. It's one of my mom's favorite books, and in fact, it was my mum that said, "Sean, I think you and Heidi need to buddy read this." And so we are buddy reading it. Thanks, Mum, because we're both absolutely loving it. I cannot express how profoundly this book has already affected me. We read half last week, and we're going to read the second half this week. And oh my God, it's just so beautiful. I mean, I wouldn't describe Sharon Butala's prose as beautiful. I would describe her prose as more workmanlike, but the things that she writes about and her emotional journey and her appreciation of nature and learning what this is and what that is and what it means to be a rancher and moving the cattle back and forth and what it's like at 4 o'clock in the morning when all you can see around you is grassland and cows. It's really quite affecting, and I don't know if I know how to say very much more than that. The subtitle of this edition is An Apprenticeship in Nature. So I think this book is particularly good for me because I grew up on a farm, not on a ranch, so I didn't know anything about ranching. But even I was such an obtuse kid on the farm that I don't really know that much about farming. And that's why I kind of gravitate towards fiction that's set on a farm, because it's a learning experience for me. And this very much is as well. This book was published in 1984, and she's very kind of evolved and ahead of her time in the way that she writes about Indigenous people and the Indigenous history of the area. Just really interesting. And I should also say, as I've almost every time I talk with or about Sharon Butala on my channel, I mention that the ranch that she lived on for decades is in near the same small town where my grandmother was born and grew up, and where I still have relatives that Sharon Butala is friends with one of my cousins. So there's that connection as well. If you like nature writing and are interested in kind of country life, I cannot recommend this highly enough. I've read half of it. I absolutely love it. It's a joy to read. And I think it's because it's half about the beauty of nature and half about the journey of a soul, the journey of a person, a human, very soulful journey that actually she gets into spirituality and Jungian stuff, which usually leaves me cold, but she writes about it in such an earthy way that I'm absolutely riveted. Really, really enjoying this. Sadly, I cannot get nearly as enthusiastic about the other book I've started this week. This is a buddy read with Joe Smith, and this is the hottest book in translation of the season, The Most Secret Memory of Men by Mohamed Mbougar Sarr, translated from the French by Lara Vergniaud. I think it's pronounced Vergniaud. I'm not really liking it, but I'm not disliking it enough that I'm going to bail, but I might bail by this time next week if it doesn't get better. This is heavy, so I'm going to set it down and put the GIF up. It's really kind of pretentious, the authorial voice. So that's one thing. The vocabulary in it is just pedantic in a way that just feels unnatural and just kind of show-offy. And I don't know whether I should blame the translator or if that or not. I have no idea. But it is bugging me, and to a certain degree, Joe. Joe largely agrees with me, which is nice because we've had some rock'em sock'em disagreements recently. But we're both, hoping that it's going to get better, that we're going to get more into it, because we've read 82 pages, and it's almost 500 pages. So yeah, I'm going to read another chunk of it next week, obviously. But the premise is that this Senegalese young novelist living in Paris, has long been obsessed with a novel that was published, I believe, in the 1930s in Senegal and was an overnight success, and everybody was talking about. There's so much buzz when this book was published. I think in the 1930s, it might have been the 1920s. This is all fictional. This author in this book does not exist. And then he was accused of plagiarism, and there's not that much information that has been revealed yet about whether the plagiarism accusation was founded or not. But he disappeared, and nobody ever heard what happened to him, and there was no more books. And our protagonist, this kind of cocky young Senegalese writer, has long been fascinated by this and could never find out anything about it. Couldn't even find a copy. There was no copies that were available to buy or whatever. And so in the early chapters, he has a kind of casual sexual encounter in a hotel room with a very preeminent African novelist of the female persuasion that doesn't particularly go well. But it turns out she has the book and she gives it to him. And he puts it in his back pocket, which just drove me crazy, because why, if it's such a rare book, would she not, why wouldn't she freak out if you put it in his back pocket? So that bugged me. But the more I read it, and then he read it, and he doesn't really tell the reader what's in it, other than he gives like the opening couple sentences or whatever. And it just started to remind me of the Da Vinci Code and The Alchemist. I can't remember, those weren't about books per se, but it was kind of that kind of plot line taking shape. This book is described as magical and demonic and cursed and containing forbidden knowledge, and it's just like, oh, really? I don't know. I'm not buying this so far. It's feeling kind of sad in that genre fiction way. And then there's all this verbosity and just sentences that go on for a page and a half in a way that just, oh, you're just showing off. But yet, there's a lot about literary politics, African writers, and African writers living in quote-unquote exile in Paris, and all of that Francophone literature and post-colonial stuff that's embedded in the story, and that's holding my interest. But I'm just worried it's going to be kind of a Da Vinci Code piece of you-know-what by the end. But it's got 4.18 rating on Goodreads. Everybody loves it. The New Yorker had a glowing review. I didn't read it. I'm assuming it's glowing. The New York Times, everywhere, everybody's talking about it. So far, I have very mixed reaction and mostly negative, so I don't mean to rain on anybody's parade, but I am not impressed so far. Let's hope that I have changed my tune by this time next week. All right, I did a video at the beginning of this year of a stack of maybe, I forget, a dozen books or 8 books that have just been gathering dust on my shelf, and I moved them from Tokyo, and I still haven't read them, and so I made a video to say if I didn't read them this year, I'm going to on-haul them, and I've got 3 or maybe 3 left. So I'm going to start this week, one of them, and that is Open City by Teju Cole, a Nigerian-American writer. I think this might be a bail, but I'm going to try it. If you've read it, tell me, do you think this will be a bail for me? I've heard that it's really kind of intellectual. It's about identity, dislocation, and history. I'm interested in those topics, but the things I've heard about it make me think that it's too philosophical. It's going to be too philosophical for me. So, I'm going to give it a try. I think he's a really good writer. That's what everybody says. I doubt I'm going to conclude that the writing's no good, but I may conclude that the writing's not for me. Let's be open, Sean, the book maniac, to Open City by Teju Cole. Wow. Even giving that sharp preliminary review of that one novel has put me in a good mood. So yeah, life is beautiful. Thanks for watching.